Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for making time for this webinar. We'll give everybody about another minute, and then we'll get started, so hang tight. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. So many of you from so many different places. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time. Today's topic is Let's Get Digital. We're excited that we have Bersin and General Mills and Xilinx all on the phone, really to kind of talk about what it means to be a digital CLO. Degreed has kind of kicked off this series around the digital CLO and what it means in 2017, what digital has done to all of our strategies, the way we've refocused our teams and our kind of approach to this engagement and employee development. Dani Johnson is here with me. She leads learning and careers at Bersin. She's going to go ahead and kick us off. And then after that, we've got a panel of two of absolutely the most progressive, forward-thinking talent development leaders we have to talk about Dani's research. So with that, thanks, Dani, for being here, and I'll let you take over.
Thanks, Sarah. We're really happy to be here. I'm particularly happy to be here with the panelists because they have some really great stories, and I get to ask them whatever questions I want. So it's good for me in my research, and hopefully it'll be useful to you as well. We have Susie McNamara from General Mills. She's a talent development leader there. And then we also have Sarice, who has a very long title that I'm going to read right now. Head of Global Talent Acquisition, Global Talent Development, and Culture and Branding at Xilinx, and so she's fairly busy. And then, as Sarah mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Learning and Career Research at Deloitte, Bersin by Deloitte. We're going to be talking about digital, but we want to talk about it with sort of a different take. We see digital as a mindset more than sort of the integration or the adoption or adaptation even of technology. The digital mindset doesn't just help the organization do the same thing better or faster. It actually enables you to do completely different things. And organizations who are doing some of those different things, sometimes enabled with technology, according to the data from my most recent study, seem to be more mature or doing things a little bit better. So we want to tackle that conversation in three specific chunks, or three specific things that CLOs are doing differently that have a digital mindset. And we'll divide our conversation into these three things. The first one is refocusing L&D strategy to compete, not just to comply. The second one is redesigning L&D operations around people, not just processes. And then the third one is rewiring L&D toolkits for flexibility, not just efficiency. And so the way that the hour will flow is we'll take these one at a time. We have a couple of poll questions because we're interested in your feedback as well. I'll share some of the new data from the new high impact learning organization study that we just completed that isn't quite published yet. And then we're going to ask our great panelists about how they're addressing some of these. So with that, let's get started with this first one, which is refocusing L&D strategy, not just to to complete, not just to comply. I want to stand on my soapbox for just a second here. We have some human capital trends data from Deloitte that tells us that the gap between the importance of employee development and L&D's ability to meet those needs has increased about 430% between 2014 and 2016. So that means while employee development is getting more important, L&D hasn't been able to meet that need. And we don't think it's because L&D is getting exponentially worse, even though that's what it sort of looks like. It's actually because worker development is so much more important and L&D hasn't been able to keep up. So I don't think that there's ever been a time when the L&D profession has been in a better situation to help the organization compete than they are right now. It's like all the stars are aligning. The technology is there. The need is definitely there. The organization is hungry for it. The employees are hungry for it. And if we as L&D professionals can get out of our own heads a little bit, we can refocus what we deliver, not just on the compliance aspect of our job, which is important, but also on the actually helping organizations be able to compete. So with that, I think we want to do a poll first thing. Which practices and tools do you use to understand how workers learn in your organization? Take a second. We're going to give you about a minute. Just click through the things that you're using in order to help understand how workers learn.
And Dani, you're live. poll is live for everybody. And question is, which practices and tools do you use to understand how workers learn in your organization? And you can select all that apply. Surveys, interviews or focus groups, analyzing LMS/HR data, design thinking, or personas.
Great. You think that's enough time, Sarah?
I think so. There's your results.
Perfect. So it looks like the majority of organizations, at least on this call, are using surveys and interviews and focus groups. Fewer are using personas and journey maps. We've seen that sort of come up as a more important thing in recent months and years. Design thinking is also getting some traction. And then we've seen a lot of people also start to mine sort of passive data, analyzing LMS and the HR data to see what they can learn about their workers there. So this aligns pretty well to what we're seeing in the research, which is always comforting. So let me show you a little bit of our research. As much as we would like to believe it, and as much as this may be the reason that some of us got into this field, we don't develop people out of the goodness of our own heart. Businesses have a purpose, and they exist to make money, and if they don't make money, shareholders, customers, and employees are all unhappy because the business actually failed to exist. So businesses make money in two ways. The first one is that they grow the business. They increase the revenue, so they grow the business. And the second one is they decrease costs. And whether we like it or not, on a balance sheet, employees are seen as a cost. So in difficult times, businesses look at ways to decrease costs, which affects employees on a really personal level. But research directly ties things like employee engagement to several business-specific metrics like customer ratings, profitability, productivity, shrinkage, absenteeism, even quality. And this data is actually from Gallup. So smarter organizations focus on development that helps get the job done, which are the things shown on the left of this slide, as well as engaging employees with their own careers, which is shown on the right-hand side. And both are necessary to help provide sort of balanced development in an organization. And those enlightened CLOs understand that we're not just doing this to make employees happy, or actually trying to make sure that they're ready for whatever is next. So our data, level 1 through level 4. Level 1 is the least mature in an least mature type of learning organization. And level 4 is that most mature type of organization. When we ask the question, how effective is your organization at preparing you to perform well in your current role? Level 4 organizations, 97% of level 4 organizations said they were either effective or very effective at doing that. So they've got it down. And if you compare that to level 1, where only 36%, or roughly over a third, are effective or very effective in helping somebody perform in their current role, you can see sort of a disconnect between a really immature organization and a mature one. And then as far as the long-term career one goes, I thought this was a really interesting question. Those level 4 organizations, 81% say they're either effective or very effective at helping their employees prepare for long-term career success, whether it's in their organization or whether it's not. Whereas level 1 organizations say only about 16% are to that level. Another interesting point with this data is we actually asked 3 questions here. We asked current role, we asked long-term career, and then we asked one in the middle, which was prepare for the next role. And that prepare for the next role, while it's important, it doesn't seem to be significant, meaning it's not a differentiator between organizations at the highest level versus the lowest level. So if you think about the amount of time and effort we put into leveling up trainings within organizations, it's something that we do, but it's not a differentiator. So I wonder if there's a way to maybe rethink some of that. So I want to ask one question to each of our panelists, and we'll start with Susie. I'd love to know how you're rethinking your strategy to meet both of those sort of short-term needs for performance as well as the long-term needs for development.
So it's a great question, and my extra pithy answer, and then I'll elaborate a little bit, is that we are rethinking our approach completely. We are rethinking our strategy. In fact, we've been engaging with Bersin and then Deloitte on rethinking how we will develop our talent in the future. And so we're doing a lot of work in this space. And I think, this question, there's really two sides to it, the short term and then the longer term. But there are a set of kind of commonalities in terms of how we're approaching this that are true in either case. And the first is most important, and the first is that we are anchoring our talent development strategy in the same, using the same strategy that we use as a company for everything we do, which for us is called consumer first, which may not mean much in this setting, but essentially what that's saying is putting the consumer at the heart of everything we do, which for me, where I sit, my consumer are all of the employees at General Mills. And so everything that we're doing, whether we're trying to meet their short-term needs to ensure that they're successful in their current role, or whether we're thinking more longer-term and ensuring that they are that their development needs more broadly are being met, the consumer or the employee is at the center of everything. And so on that previous poll, in terms of how we're doing this, for us it's all about design thinking. And so, that's really the common denominator for us and how we're approaching all of this. And then the other two things that are common across both sides of this, short term and longer term, are that all of our approaches are going to be enabled by technology, which hasn't always been the case for us. And it's all focused on learning experiences versus episodic training. So on the short-term side, the way we're thinking about it is really how do we meet the consumers or the employees' needs where they are. And so from a short-term perspective, and you think about what people need to be able to do, just to be able to need to know in order to just be able to do their jobs, it's a very sort of practical, tactical approach. It's how do we reposition learning so that people can very quickly, anytime, anywhere, on any device, access what they need to know how to do their jobs. So which is a very different approach than in the past, where we would have probably relied pretty heavily on ILT training to teach people how to do their jobs. They're not willing to wait anymore. They're impatient, as they should be. On the flip side, on the longer term, we're really thinking about knowing how roles are evolving, and that even positions that exist today probably won't exist in a couple of years. We're really thinking about what are some of those key transition experiences, and how can we really start to study our consumers in those spaces to build experiences that are meaningful to them. And so we think about some of those as, individual contributors, a leader of people, a leader of leaders, a leader of an organization. And so we're thinking about it that way, and we're now using design thinking to design experiences to support people during some of those key transitions. So those are just a couple of the things we're doing, but again, back to the short answer, it's really completely rethinking how we develop talent at General Mills.
Thanks, Susie. You mentioned a couple of really interesting things. Design thinking, which I think we'll get into quite a bit in the next section, but I think it's interesting that you're viewing all of the people that you serve as consumers, because that's exactly what they are. If you think about how learning has opened up in the past 3 or 4 years, it's a seller's market, right? People can go anywhere for their learning, and so in order to get their attention and make sure that you're meeting their needs, thinking of them as consumers and using that idea of design thinking is pretty cool. I can imagine that it's changed things you do on the ground quite a bit as well, as far as the learning department goes.
It has, yeah, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit, but it absolutely has. I mean, we have to rethink how we're organized, how we're funded, how we measure. I mean, all of the sort of the basics, all of the rules have gone out the window, which I will say, I mean, my experience so far in leading this change is that it has made some people really, really uncomfortable. But we do have to think about our roles differently. We have to think about what type of talent we need leading this work for us. I mean, there's just everything is sort of fair game right now to be thinking very differently about how we do it, and our consumers expect us to be doing it differently. So we have to get there.
Very cool. I can imagine it would be unsettling to begin with, but once you open that thing up, it's got to be liberating. Sarice, let's talk about what your organization is doing.
Sure, great. Very similar to what Susie described. As a company, we first too had to sort of acknowledge the change in the learning landscape, not only from a technology standpoint, but how we look at roles, how we look at people as well. And we knew we needed to change with it. So we asked ourselves, essentially, how do we power effective learning and sustain a competitive advantage? So from a business perspective, that stakeholder perspective, we were also looking at that. At Xilinx, we found that the biggest competitive advantage for us as an organization was to have employees who are excited to learn. So when employees are excited to learn, they feel more empowered, engaged, and productive, and they become more valuable to the business, right? So that's essentially also where we grounded ourselves. In rethinking our strategy, we decided we needed to create an environment that empowered our employees to drive their own development and their careers, but in a more effective way. So in November of last year, we introduced a new learning strategy. We called it Learn to the Power of X, and a new learning platform called Degreed. Learn to the Power of X really represents the idea that there are exponential opportunities to learn and grow. It's also the exponent of X, also stands for Xilinx. We've been live now since November. Our learning strategy has both excited and empowered our learners in many ways. And essentially getting back to that consumer, point, our learning environment is now learner-driven. So our learners are able to identify pathways and specific, personal development needs and consume learning in that timely fashion that best meets their learning style. We wanted to inspire our learners, and we want our learners to inspire others. So we really wanted to, create an experience, as Susie said, that allows learners to start learning groups, to share, to collaborate, having that social aspect. But also we wanted our learners to feel more aligned, around our competencies in particular and how they grow those competencies and how you can make those connections through all of our people processes. We also wanted to create some optimization. So it's much easier now for our learners to find the content, consume it. They don't have to waste time searching for it. There's the ability to rate and share. So our learners really don't have to guess at what's quality or what might benefit them. And it's further optimizing the way that they address their current skill needs in the short term, and also how that translates to performance and longer-term impact, in their job. We basically felt that by this investment, because we did have to change the way we fund and the way we work, and investing in a new strategy and platform, we've really created a competitive advantage for Xilinx. So it's not just to comply, right? It's to compete, and it's about retaining talent. It's about growing talent. It's about attracting talent. Since I also manage talent acquisition, this was also very important to me. And our hope is that our employees feel more satisfied, they're able to grow, enrich their skills, and it should show up in performance, increased skill levels, higher retention, all those things. So overall, it has been, so far, a very positive experience. We'll talk more about the technology piece in later questions and some metrics.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, Sarice. So I mentioned that I just finished this big study, and you mentioned something that keeps on coming back over and over again. You have actually focused on creating the conditions needed for learning rather than creating the content needed for learning. And I think that's a huge mind shift that a lot of organizations that are trying to do this have to make.
Yeah.
Talk to me just a little bit about how you got there, how you got to the point where you're like, wait, we're doing this wrong. We got to do conditions, not content.
Well, I mean, what drove it primarily, not only, did our employees share their voice. We did do an employee survey. We know they wanted more options. We knew they wanted, more timely access, the on-demand concept, and we are in a technology age. So that was part of it. But also, we just aren't scaled anymore to deliver and to develop that kind of content. And we know there's so much out there that's already available, and most of it free, that it's really about, providing that environment or that experience for people to find those things that meet their needs where they are, as Susie said, and also to provide that, the different modality experiences. Everybody learns in a different way. So the days of sitting in a classroom for 3 days are long gone, right?
Yeah. So I think it's also interesting that both you and Susie mentioned we're doing completely different things using technology to augment that. Like we're not taking the technology and making things more efficient. We're actually using it to do completely different things than we've done in the past. Which actually brings us probably a pretty good lead into the second section, which is redesigning L&D operations around people, not just around processes. So Susie brought up design thinking, and Sarice talked a little bit about it too. it's a thing out there now. And as the modern learner, we've talked a lot about the modern learner the last couple of years. They've sort of wrestled control away from L&D and sort of decided on their own how and what and where they're going to learn. It's become more important that L&D takes into account what the learner wants and provides that for them. I think it's really interesting in that last question, Sarice, you also mentioned business. Like how do we enable the worker to get their work done? It's not just about learning in the learner experience. It's actually also about helping them get the work done. So I want to talk kind of internally, you know, how the mindset has been a big shift, but I'm assuming that the operations around that mindset and the things that you've done lately have also required some shifts. And I think we have another poll next. Is that right, Sarah? Yeah. So
we do, and it's live.
Okay, awesome. So which of these factors are most important to the organization when selecting learning technologies? Choose the top 3. One of the things that we've realized when CLOs get this different mindset about the technology, it's not just to enable things that you're doing now, but things that you could do in the future if you just thought about it a little bit differently. It kind of feels like these things change as well. And so this is a poll that we're putting out there to see if that's true. Cost used to be huge. You know, some of those reputation and brand used to be huge, and we're really interested to see if that holds true even with this new mindset. Let me just give you a few more seconds. Okay, let's take a look. Interesting. So it looks like cost is coming in 3rd. User interface and user experience is coming in 1st. Ease of integration with other technologies, which is also interesting because it seems like a lot of organizations are moving away from platforms to sort of an ecosystem or a series or network of technologies in order to support the learners. Interesting. I want to show you a little bit about some of the capabilities from our study. We asked the question in our high impact learning organization research, we asked how the organization performs with respect to several things. I think we asked about 30 capabilities, and these are they. We took all of those capabilities and we did a massive factor analysis, and the small boxes that you see is what came out of that factor analysis. So they grouped them statistically by similarity, and that's what you're looking at on the screen. And then what we did is we took each of those groups, the invisible and systemic group, business of L&D, which is your learning strategy, your project management, that type of stuff. The traditional things, instructional design, content, and training, stuff that has to do with performance, stuff that has to do with analytics, work design, globalization, and contextualization. We took these 8 groups and we regressed them. We did a regression analysis, which was basically looking for strong correlations between these things and the things that affect maturity in learning organizations. And not surprisingly, some of them turned out to be fairly significant, and some of them turned out to not be fairly significant. And this is what sort of happened. So these 4 things, when we took a look at these against the things that affect maturity, these 4 things popped as important. So invisible and systemic, which is basically some of the newer things that are coming up because of this technology or this new mindset, which includes maintaining a tech infrastructure, adding roles to expand tech capabilities, collecting continuous sensing data, designing mobile first, developing experiences versus programs, and organization L&D works to be responsive to the organizational needs, or to org needs. So these types of things have sort of come in the last couple of years as being important. The business of L&D stayed there. Traditional popped as significant, and then the last one was performance. So we're seeing a much closer alignment of work and learning in the organization, and so performance is becoming much more of a job of L&D than it has been in the past. So performance consulting to make sure that we're actually meeting the needs of the business, and then performance improvement, which you can't see on that screen, but performance improvement, which is helping the people actually increase their level of performance there. The interesting thing about these 4 things, actually just one of these things is when we took a look at organizations that were doing really well and focusing really heavily on some of these traditional things, the instructional design, the content development, and the training delivery, it actually has a negative relationship with outcome variables. So that means while these things are good and they're necessary, if an organization is focusing too much on these things, it's actually wasting heads or doing your organization a little bit of harm, which is an interesting and I'm sure a little bit of a controversial finding. We still think these things are important, but not to the level that they used to be important. And the ways that we're seeing them applied now is quite different than the way that they've been applied in the past. So for example, instructional design used to be used to create a great course. Now we're seeing instructional design, or at least those principles, be applied in creating a great experience, or making sure that job rotations have areas for reflection and objectives and those types of things. So that's the data from our research, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions about some of the capability adjusting, I guess, that Susie and Sarice are doing. The first question is, how are you restructuring your team and capabilities, et cetera, to meet some of these new demands that you have and the new mindset that you have? And we'll start with Sarice on that one.
Thanks. Okay, so yeah, I mean, just acknowledging the role of L&D is definitely changing in terms of how we engage with the business, how we perform our roles. Old L&D was much more focused on classroom, face-to-face delivery. As L&D practitioners, you know, we were required to be more content experts, right, with course writing expertise and minimal technical expertise and analytic skills. But with the evolution that we're going through in L&D and how I've looked at my team, the focus for us as L&D practitioners is now more on performance consultancy, also being experts in how people learn, the how part, and in the curation of learning content. So with the changing technology, the digital age, L&D practitioners, you know, really from my perspective are now required to be more digitally savvy, more technical, right, in order to do that, and in terms of using technology, and then also data analytic skills are really important to support learning consumption. So how do we, you know, understand what people are learning and then drive future decisions around that? L&D, you know, from, you know, my group, you know, we also act as marketeers. We're selling, we're influencing business, stakeholder engagement, and we're, you know, more involved in curriculum design instead of just designing and setting up, you know, training courses. So it's much more about digital content development. I added, when I started at Xilinx about a year and a half ago, I added 4 new members to my global talent development team. And really they have a lot of these skills. And with the rollout of our new strategy and platform, every member of my team is now engaged in supporting the strategy, helping with content curation, consulting with the business to build pathways, design curriculum to best meet the needs of the business. And that's global. It's truly been a shift for some, for myself. But we're embracing it, and we're making the shift so far successfully. I think the team overall feels more energized now and excited about our roles and how we can impact and build organizational capability with our new strategy and platform. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it totally does. I think it's interesting that you said that your team feels more energized. I hear that a lot in organizations that have made the shift because it's just a more interesting job. Once you went through some of these new capabilities and these new responsibilities, it just becomes a more interesting job. I want to put you on the spot just really quickly, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I'm really interested in knowing kind of what your biggest challenge was in getting the right team in place.
Good question. So a little bit unfair because I had the honor of working with a few people before I came to Xilinx. So I knew their skills and capabilities. So the real challenge was just in not so much knowing what skills I needed or that they had the skills, It was probably convincing, other members of my peer group or upper management to understand where we're going and the direction of the strategy itself, right? Once I had that, and everybody's sort of in line, it made a lot more sense why I was hiring and why I was going for the kind of people I brought into the team.
Very cool. Susie, same question. How are you restructuring your team and capabilities, et cetera?
So Sarice's answer was so thorough that I don't have a ton to add. So my answer is yes to everything she said. The couple of things that I would add is just as I'm working with the talent that we currently have in these roles, a lot of the questions I think that they're struggling with is all of these things that I used to know before, ADDIE and participant-centered learning and all this, does this not matter? Do I now need to be focusing all of my attention on digital or on learning experiences? And my answer is yes and. So as we think about the future talent and as I think about how I'm restructuring my organization, I am looking for people who have experience in talent development and almost more importantly, are people who are really nimble and agile and curious. Because that, I think, is what, even if you look at the practice and how much it's evolved in the last 5 years, it's almost reinvented itself twice in a period of 5 years. So who's to say we're done? I would like to think that we're just getting started. And so what I'm looking for are these people who are just highly curious and really, really nimble, who will be who are able to bring us into the 21st century, which we're not quite there yet at General Mills, but equally importantly, already have an eye on what's next, and we're already starting to build those capabilities. And so that's the way I'm thinking about it, and those are the types of people that I'm looking for and that I'm trying to build my organization with. And sometimes it feels like I'm searching for unicorns, but they are out there, and I've found some of them.
That's fascinating. That's not the first time I've heard that. They're like, we can teach them the skills. What we really need is people that are curious about what's going on and can apply ideas from different areas to L&D. Very interesting. I've also heard the unicorn thing. I've heard it referred to as a full stack instructional designer or a full stack L&D person, which basically means they can do everything, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can find out there, but I think it's interesting that that skill set is broadening so much for the learning space because it has to.
And Dani, I'm experiencing that right now. I would just add, that's exactly what I found is a couple of unicorns, so, I think you're on the right track, Susie. Very nimble, very flexible, very curious, very, energized by their own learning as well as helping others, so yeah, all good.
Yeah, and the other thing I would think about when I think about my team or my organization, and it's actually kind of going back to, I think it was actually back to the poll, but I think about my team, obviously the direct reports and the people working specifically on learning within General Mills, but then I have really started to open my mind to say that my team goes beyond that. So even technology, when I'm looking at the technologies that we will bring in to General Mills to enable what we're trying to do, I not only look at what the technology does and what the experience that it's creating, but I also think about the entire package. So what do I get when I buy this technology? Do I get a team of curators? Do I get, X, Y, and Z? Do I get a marketing team? So I don't know, the situation for everybody on this call and what size of teams you have and what size of budgets you have, but I have to be pretty scrappy, and I'm looking at my team well beyond the people who have a reporting relationship to me or even the people that are getting a biweekly paycheck from General Mills, and so I'm really thinking much bigger than that.
I love that. Would you mind expounding just a little bit on that? Are you borrowing from other departments, do you mean? Are they doing special projects for you? Are you bringing in part-time workers? Like, how are you meeting that need?
Yes, to both of those,
okay.
And then I'd add a third. So yes, I do borrow from other departments. In fact, especially when I'm leading any major design thinking or major initiatives that are centered in design thinking. So I'll give you an example. For the last year, I've been studying managers of people at General Mills because I was tasked about a year ago to fix them. I'm oversimplifying all of this, but I was tasked about a year ago to fix them, and I said, okay, well, what's broken? And a bunch of people rattled off a list of capability gaps, and so I said, thank you for your information, but let's actually figure out what's really going on. So we used design thinking and studied ourselves for the last year, and thankfully I didn't go with those initial lists of capability gaps because it had nothing to do with what's actually going on. And so in that case, I actually created a global cross-functional team, and it wasn't even talent development people. It was people from the business. I had a finance person on my team, someone from R&D, someone from supply chain, someone from sales, to bring that experience to life. So that's one example. I do also engage a lot of external contractors to just, do specific kind of time-bound projects for me. But then the other is, even as I think about, as we're signing on to different technologies, whether it's a learning platform or an LMS or whatever it is, I look at, again, what the technology offers beyond just the technology. So what kind of teams am I buying when I buy this service or this product? Am I buying a marketing team? Am I buying a curation team? And that has made my decisions for me in a lot of cases, where I know that I'm not just buying a technology or a product, I'm buying an entire team of people to help enable what we're trying to do at General Mills. And so I see them as an extension of my team too.
That is really interesting. The last time Degreed and Bersin did a webinar, we had Barry Murphy, I'm just going to say his name, from Airbnb, and he said basically the same thing. He said that his most important buying decision when he was looking at technology is what that team looks like and what sort of support that they can give him, because it increases the capabilities of his team. Very interesting. Cool. I want to switch to this last question here. What are some of the things that you guys are doing internally to build some of these capabilities? And we'll switch back to Sarice on this. Obviously, new capabilities are necessary. How are you building them? And given the fact that skills turn over like every 2 years, how are you keeping them fresh? Like, what are you doing to take advantage of that curiosity that you hired?
Well, I mean, it's I think Susie described it well in terms of, applying the design thinking, approach. I mean, we're doing that every day. We're living it. We're engaging with the business. I also love that she mentioned, you're not just buying a tool, you're buying a team. And this is not meant to be a Degreed advertisement, but I do think the difference for us in looking at a solution was in the capability that we would get with it, the level of support, the level of experience. And so we're learning from that. We're taking that and we're actually making it our own. Part of our brand and part of the Learn to the Power of X concept was born because, we took that and we leveraged those experiences that, and expertise that we're getting, and we made it our own. We knew we needed to have it be our own identity. And then when it became our identity, and it's grown, it's been widely accepted, now people really understand it, and so they're actually changing the way they engage with us, right? So seeking out us as that resource to help them build a pathway, building that methodology, and changing the way that we're focusing, our contribution back to the business has sort of been a natural, organic thing. Would I say everybody is expert at it yet, in 5 months? No, but we're learning, we're growing, and that it's actually an on-the-job kind of thing. But what you really need are people with the potential, right, and the ability to adapt. And I do believe that then we all get better and better, and also you have to be okay with change, and you have to be okay with that. We may not have all the answers. But we're engaging in that, and we're learning together. But we've had a great partner that's helped us along the way as well. So I hope that answered the question. I really feel like, I don't know where we'll be 2 years from now. I mean, we're actually kind of in phase 2 of some of our evolution of our strategy, believe it or not, in 5 months. But we have a lot of really great things that we're going to be doing this coming year. In our fiscal year, which started, just this April 1st. So with that, we're stretching ourselves. We're saying we're going to go do these other things, and we're going to engage leaders now as teachers to help us do that. So it's gone even beyond our own expertise and our own skill level. We're actually skilling our senior leaders now to help us, extend the manager conversation, extend the development of learning through others. Right, which is really a part of our strategy. So we're not all going to be experts in all things. We actually need it takes a village, is my phrase that I say often.
I like it too, and that's one of the bigger things that the research kicked out was the idea of a learning organization is not the L&D department telling what everybody else would do. A learning organization is one that actually everybody has the responsibility. The executives,
absolutely,
business line, the managers, and even the employees have a responsibility to make sure that they have what they need and that they're all evolving together in the way they need to go. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're totally living that.
Awesome. Well, you should talk later because we might be able to write a case study. I want to switch to the next topic because I see all these great questions coming in, and I want to make sure we have enough time for them. The third area that we want to talk about is this idea that CLOs are doing things differently by rewiring L&D toolkits for flexibility, not just efficiency. L&D has cared a lot about efficiency for a really long time. I think the organization as a whole has cared a lot about efficiency for a really long time. And it shows in some of our more traditional metrics. But the more mature organizations from our research are sort of taking a step back from efficiency and looking at ways to embrace this idea of flexibility. And that's shown in a couple of just really quick data bits from the research. But first, before we get there, we want to ask a quick poll. We'll give you about a minute for this one. Which technology will have the biggest positive impact on your L&D team's ability to respond to shifting worker demands over the next 3 years? Go ahead and choose 3 of those. Sarah, I'm not sure that's live yet. There it is. Okay, let's take a look at the results. Okay, it looks like artificial intelligence, learning analytics, learner experience or engagement platforms, and collaboration and social networking are coming out on top. Oh, and video and microlearning. Very cool. The LMS is down toward the bottom as we would probably expect it to be. Very interesting. Let me show you some of the things that we saw. Some of these CLOs that have different mindsets are actually experimenting with technology to meet business and learner needs. So the following technologies shown here on the screen are used significantly more in mature organizations. So I actually just took my data set and I divided it by those in level 3 and 4, or the really mature ones, and the ones in level 1 and 2, and then saw how many times greater the usage was for these than in others. So the 2 that really surprised me was artificial intelligence and virtual reality software. 15 times more than their counterparts in lower maturity organizations. They're utilizing these technologies and figuring out how to make them work for learner and business needs. And then even some of the more pedestrian ones, the ones that have been around for a while, including search software and mobile apps, they're being used 5 times more in mature organizations than they are in lower level maturity organizations. So that's the first thing that they're doing. The second thing that they're doing is actually they're using data differently. And there are 2 pieces of data on this page. The first one on the left talks about mature organizations using data to continually sense work and development so that both can be improved. And so level 4 organizations, there's this huge jump between level 4 and any of the others of what they're doing as far as sensing continuously and feeding that data back into the system. They have a better handle on how to do that. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is when you look at organizations by level, you can see a real kind of stark difference between the types of metrics or the types of data sources they're going to. So mature organizations are paying attention to outcomes versus activity, whereas less mature organizations are paying more attention to activity types of things. And this is shown in the 5 things that we've chosen here. Performance metrics, more mature organizations are 2.6 times. They're paying attention to this metric 2.6 times more than their less mature counterparts. KPIs, observable behavior change, talent metrics, and other HC data. All of these reflect outcomes versus activity, and those higher level organizations are just using them a lot more than others. So I want to ask a couple of questions with respect to this too. And we've hit on a couple of these questions just a little bit, but let's start with Susie on this one. How are you using technology differently with this new sort of digital mindset you've got going on?
Yeah, so I mean, as I opened with my answer to the first question about how we're rethinking our strategy, and one of the common denominators is technology. And I think the important thing, though, is that I think for years, and I've seen this play out in different parts of our organization, our learning is decentralized, generally speaking. But we've often chased technology as the strategy, whereas we're really taking a step back to say that what is our strategy, what are we trying to do, and what is the role that we play in the company to enable us to grow as an organization. And then how will the technology enable us to do what we need to do? And by thinking about it that way, it actually, I think, has forced us to bring in a lot less technology and not chase all the shiny objects and be really, really focused on what we need it to do. Again, back with that idea of the consumer at the center of it. And so for us, I mean, the role that technology plays as a global organization, and I should mention that we are a global organization that up until recently really functioned as a multinational organization, and there's a pretty big distinction there. But now as we think about ourselves as a global organization, we're leveraging technology to create a consistent learning experience for people around the world. And so that it touches just about everything that we do in learning, including what we do, by the way, in any ILT experiences that we have, because we do still do some of that. The way I even think about how it redefines that is, and some of the folks at Deloitte have heard me say this, but it's humans in a room. So I no longer think of it as instructor-led training where you go to a 2-day session and you're basically listening to a talking head tell you everything that you need to know, when we all know that 80 to 90% of what you learned is lost after 2 days. That's not a really safe mechanism for learning. However, if you think about those experiences now as learning experiences, as opportunities where you have all of these people in a room, how can you maximize that experience, and how can you leverage technology to make it even richer and to create flipped learning experiences? So we're really, again, using the technology to sort of be the foundation of enabling all of the other things that we're trying to do and make everything better and make learning truly a continuous learning experience and a holistic experience versus learning as these episodic points in time.
I love that. You and Sarice have both used the word enable, and that seems to continually be popping in the research as well. We're enabling the work and the learning at the same time. They're closer to one thing than they've ever been before. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Sarice, how about you?
Oh, gosh, yeah. So I would start with, since we're further along in this, I'll just take a step back and say, very similar to what Susie described, with the landscape changing, we needed to move, to a more blended learning approach, right? It's not that ILT has gone away forever, but we are taking the approach that it's more bite-sized, that it's, 2 or 3 hours, to reinforce content. And the way we're approaching our ILTs isn't the typical, traditional way of facilitation either. Our facilitator's role has changed, and we've now gone to a co-teach kind of approach with a leader as teacher, one of our senior leaders, where we're looking at the experience as more conversational. Leaders, managers learning from each other, for example, but they're also learning from a leader and getting exposure and learning from their experience. And the way that ties back to technology is that the technology is enabling our ability to create these pathways where there's multiple modalities of content on demand, easy to use, and additionally, they can attend, this we were calling them workshops, these 2 to 3 hour sessions with their peers to talk about that content. So we use almost like case studies. We look at the content, we have pre-work, and then they go in and they actually are able to have a discussion about it, learn about it, and apply it to their daily life, daily work. And not only, is there an HR person who might have the ability to keep the conversation moving along or inject, great questions, but the leader is there to really ground it in what's important to Xilinx and how we operate at Xilinx and how they've gotten, through those kinds of challenges themselves as a leader. So we're really combining the approach. But in general, because we do know people want things, the modern learner is, less patient and more overwhelmed, we did use technology to provide that environment where if they only have 2 minutes in the day, that's 2 minutes they can read an article, or watch a TED Talk.
Yeah.
And then they can collaborate, and then they can share it, and then they can extend that, and they can choose as an element of their pathway to go to this type of workshop session. So one size does not fit all. It's all about personalization for us, providing that informal learning option, as well as the combination of blended learning. And again, some people don't learn from listening or sitting in a classroom. So we've made it more interactive, and if they want to do that, then they may get more out of that kind of session as well.
Very cool. You've talked a lot about some of the, I just lost my train of thought. You've talked about this idea of personalization and using technology to personalize the experience for learners so that they are enabled in their job. You've also talked about using it to connect with other people that can help them or teach them, which I think is fantastic and definitely the way that we're seeing some of the more mature organizations go. I have one more question here, but I think we're going to skip it because I've seen a lot of really good questions come in, and I want to make sure that we have time to get to some of those. So, Sarah, I think I'm going to toss it back to you. I want to thank our two panelists for answering my questions, even the ones that weren't scripted. And I'll toss it back to Sarah.
Yeah, we have a ton of questions, so I appreciate that consideration, Dani. So we'll start with probably one of the biggest that we hear everywhere is perhaps diving a bit more into change management that are helping with facilitators. This person said that they have some folks that have been with the company for a long time, 25 plus years, and are resistant to this change. Even though they know what's going on, do you guys have any advice for helping convince them with these more modern, informal approaches?
Do you want me to start, Sarice?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we did take a very, well thought out, change management approach to this. We know this is a big shift. Without having it in front of me, I'm gonna try to remember all the things that we did. But we essentially came up with first this plan to, engage the executives into the benefits of doing something like this, and really provided them with, what's happening in the changing landscape. Why is it important? How do we want to, create those assets for the company? Help with, the bottom line, right? The attracting, the retaining of talent, and the productivity pieces. So we did put all that together with the help of research from Bersin and from Degreed. Additionally, we did a cascading, communications approach. So we went out to each executive staff and we presented this information, and we related it back to what we had learned, from the employee survey, as well as from talking to business partners in the field. What are people saying? What do they need? What do they want? And how can we build that into a new learning strategy? So it took a lot of work, and then building onto that, once we got them on board, and we did pilots. We did extensive pilots. We had a 100-person and a 200-person pilot. And we took the feedback from that process to enable further communications and to really make sure we were, extracting that and learning from it and applying it. We went out and we did manager meetings, manager briefings. Again, a total roadshow globally to build on that. And because we had those people in the pilots sprinkled throughout the organization, we leveraged them as well to speak to their experience. And we definitely selected some opinion leaders and some people who would help, propagate that and the brand. Then we did all that branding work. I mean, the whole marketing and influencing piece is no joke. We really worked with our marketing team. We built that identity, that brand. We made it exciting. And then to top it off, we did a worldwide sort of global set of splash events. After we launched. Part of the launch was the technology, but part of the launch was our new strategy. So we wanted people to experience it. We did sort of a Geek Street approach. People got to come in, ask questions, log on for the first time, get help they needed in all of our global locations. We had senior leadership represented, we had HR people represented, and we had people who'd been through the pilots represented. And we did giveaways and fun and talked about learning and celebrated it because it really is all about our consumer, our customers being our people, and making it fun and what did it matter to them? Why does it matter to them in their career? And we have a philosophy, and it's part of our internal talent management strategy, which is your success matters. So it was all built off that. And the Learn to the Power of X really resonated with people. And the digital piece obviously really resonated with a lot of our engineering community. And so we just really had a full cascading plan of pulling people in. And just to give a little bit, because we didn't talk about metrics, the good news for us is that we, in 5 months, have had an 80% adoption of the company. 80% of our employees have logged in. And we're seeing incredible results. Over 25,000, content, 20,000 learning, content have been consumed and marked complete in just 4 months. And people are sharing over 39,000, pieces of content. So we're tracking all those kinds of metrics as well to see the direction and the trajectory that we're on. We've had people, get so engaged that our business groups at their own request are building custom pathways. Over 70 pathways have already been built, including some that we've built additionally in the GTD team. It's been an exciting journey so far, and we're continuing to push on that journey as far as extending and hopefully creating 100% adoption over time.
I think that's really useful, and I'm going to pass the next question over to Susie that's a little bit more technology focused, and I'm combining a few questions here. But how do MOOCs in the LMS fit in this new L&D landscape?
So I get questions about the LMS on a very regular basis internally, and I think about learning as we have this big learning ecosystem, and LMS is just one dot in our ecosystem. It's not the biggest dot. It's not the dot that kind of hugs the entire ecosystem and keeps it all together. It is a dot. And MOOCs or anything that we're currently housing in our LMS is just another point in the ecosystem, but the ecosystem is a lot bigger than that. The ecosystem is all of our internal content in places that it's saved right now. It's not ideal, but a lot of it's on SharePoint. All the external content that we purchase, so Get Abstract, Harvard Managed Mentor, all the free stuff externally that we have access to. It's all of those places where people can learn. That is the entire ecosystem. And so we think about all of that, and my goal is to find technology, which I have. We are also now a Degreed customer, but it's to find that technology that makes it so that our learners only have one place to go to get access to the entire learning ecosystem. One other thing that I don't know that is clear in how I just responded to this, though, is that the ecosystem goes beyond just internal content and the stuff that the company buys. And if you're thinking about your ecosystem that way, you need to think bigger than that, because from a learner's perspective, from the consumer perspective, learning is everything. Learning is what they can find on Google. It's the Forbes article they read. It's everything. And so we need to open our minds to that. And people get the pushback. Well, what if it's not great content? Well, they're reading it anyway. So let's worry less about perfect content, and let's focus on enabling our learners to have access to it. And so as we look for technology, it was that solution that can really harness the entire ecosystem and make it really simple for our consumers or our learners to have access to learning whenever they need it, wherever they need it, on whatever device they want to access it on. I know that was the first part of the question. I forgot the second part of the question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The second part was just
MOOC
on
part.
MOOCs. Yes, you did,
Yes.
and that was it actually. So you covered it. And To be honest, there are about 50 more questions here, but we're right at the top of the hour. And to be respectful of everyone's time, I think that we'll go ahead and close it here. I did want to put out to the audience that both Susie and Sarice have put out that they will be willing to answer questions one-off. So if you would like to reach out, I have put my contact information, Sarah Danzel at Degreed, here. Feel free to reach out and I can facilitate that relationship for you with actual questions that you might have. But again, I just wanted to take a quick minute to say thank you to both Susie and Sarice. I got so much feedback through not only chat, but other folks that are on that were saying they were typing furiously notes. So thank you for your actionable ideas and feedback and a glimpse into your successful strategies. And thank you to Dani for all of your great insights from Bersin and sharing the latest research. And to the audience, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.